We are super excited to have a very, very special guest, near and dear to my heart, somebody who literally helped jumpstart my career, someone who's done the same for probably thousands of reps outside of San Francisco and across the entire globe, uh, honestly. The infamous Marc Wendling, who currently leads corporate sales at Snowflake, and we're going to talk a bit about his journey from Series C to IPO. And what I'm excited about for today's conversation is that you should, if you're a leader, you're going to learn about some leadership. If you're a rep, you better take your pencil out, your pen out, however you take notes, and start to learn how to engage some of these folks like Mark along the way. This is going to be jam-packed action interview, and it's near and dear to me because I haven't had a chance to talk with Mark like this for a long time. So, Mark, welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to get into, let me make sure I know how to use slides here. Mark, before we get into the Snowflake side, I wanted to have opportunity to just allow people to get a little bit of background on your journey up until Snowflake, right?
Yeah,
So you didn't just magically come in at Series C and be a part of one of the hottest companies ever. It's still going there. You had some journey, but can you give some folks a little bit of a background? Who is Mark? Where'd you start? Up until Snowflake, and then we'll jump
sure.
into the exciting part of the
Yeah. I try to keep it come somewhat short. I was born and raised in France, and at first my what I wanted to do for a living was either being a professional pianist or a conductor. Music was my absolute goal. So eventually I dropped out of like music studies and stuff, even though I think I could have probably made a career out of that, but not necessarily something like outrageously shiny. And I love music too much to not necessarily have great success. And here's some interesting story. When I was 14 years old, my parents kept sending me to English speaking countries for summer, and I was staying with a family in Mississauga, Ontario, so close to Toronto. And I wanted to practice my piano, but they did not have an instrument. And 2 miles away from their house was an amazing piano store. All they sold was Steinways, Bosendorfers, Yamaha, Grand, and all that stuff. And one day, a little shy, I got into this shop, knocked on the door, and asked, "When you don't have customers, do you mind if I practice?" Like, yeah, dude, go ahead. So
Your
I
first
started
cold call. Your first cold
my
call,
first
Mark.
call, my first cold call. So I go and practice in there, and then eventually I became friends with the salesman, John Elliott, and the guy says, "Hey, do you actually want to just help me sell pianos occasionally?" Like, sure. And I realized that even though it was $100,000 transaction, we're talking about $100,000 pianos that people would show up and buy. And for some of them that did not even like play music, so it was an interesting process. And I realized that I could play a ton of stuff differently on a different instrument and influence their decision process. Um, and that made me realize like, wait, you can just like change people's mind like that just by doing something that is uh, somewhat linked to what they want to do. Okay, that's interesting. And
Mm.
I remembered that when it was time for me to again like say no to music and go to very very different paths. It was like, well, maybe I should go to sales. I like influencing people. I like just getting stuff done that may not be done if you don't push it. So that's how I got into sales. And eventually, as I graduated in '98 from college, I got straight into it. So I've been in sales since then, which that explains the gray hair. Um,
I couldn't tell.
and
I thought that was,
it's the light. It's great.
yeah, I thought that was the lights.
Um, and then so I had a first experience in a VAR. I didn't stay long because VAR is a very difficult job, and it's about pushing so many products and negotiating margin after the transaction is done, pretty much.
VAR for those
Via
who maybe didn't catch that.
value added reseller.
Value added reseller. That's right.
Yeah,
Channel
and
sales. Channel sales.
channel sales. And back in '98, Dell was actually killing everyone else. So if you worked with the distribution channel, traditional, you would sell brands like IBM, Compaq, HP, Digital back then, and it was both Unix and NT platforms. But like Dell was winning everyone.
I remember those commercials, dude.
Yeah.
You're getting a Dell. Did they have those over on your side
They
when you were there?
not in France, no,
They
but
don't use that word. What would that term be in French? Dude, you're getting a Dell. Do you remember that English commercial?
I do, but I'm actually wondering if I don't know if we would say mech, maybe mech means like dude, but I don't even know if that would be kind of fun. Not sure about that.
Okay.
But like, so I stayed there a year because like I realized it was a falling apart, and it was not. I mean, people that I worked with, wonderful people, but they were all my age now, and I thought they were outrageously old, and so I needed something different. And I joined a recruitment firm called Michael Page in '99, and that's how things started to hum. Even though so 99 2000 were very good years. It was the pre-dot-com bust, so it was the dot-com boom. It was very, very interesting. We had a ton of stuff to do. When things started to get a little hard, I used the fact that Michael Page was a British company to transition over to the UK. It was the best decision in my life because that opened so many doors after that. And from Page, I went to the company where you and I met, Ryan, eSearch Vision, or it's called ESV Digital today.
eSearch Vision.
eSearch Vision, that's right.
Yeah.
That's how one of our founders pronounced it. So it's just so people understand why I just did say that. So here's what the interesting part was. It was a SaaS product, and we were eSearch Vision was a marketing agency running search engine marketing campaigns and programs in France, but they had developed their own technology, and they wanted to push more of the SaaS product itself for margin perspective. First in the UK, that's where I started, and then eventually from the UK, we signed a phenomenal contract with a very large company in the US, and we realized we could not serve that contract from Europe. Like if we wanted to have proper customer support, we had to move. So I moved over to the US, in 2007, and it was a very, very bootstrapped company. The founders did not want to invest in growth. What we had to solve for was very early profitability. It was very French in the way of thinking, very French back then. I know right now you have at least a dozen unicorns on the French market. So now people are realizing that you need a lot more capital to actually fund growth. But back then it was like profit, profit, profit. So we were very cheap, and that's why I hired Ryan.
Oh, come on. You know how I got to interrupt at this stage though, so folks understand this. It was 2008, the recession. I just got laid off from my first job because of the financial crisis. I was selling a home financial product. It was a company backed by AIG, and I somehow got an interview with Mark like a week later, and I go into this building. It's like this thin, right in the middle of San Francisco. It's the smallest, thinnest, cheapest looking building in San Francisco, but in the financial district. And it's
bootstrap startup,
bootstrapped. And I'm walking in, and this elevator just looks super shanky, and so do the stairs. I'm like, am I in the right place, etc. And this guy walks in, which was Mark. I didn't know at the time, obviously, for the interview. I'm sitting there. I ride the elevator up, and it's just like this door, and this, Mark lets me in. I'm like, oh, and he's like, hey, are you here for this interview? I was like, yeah, I'm Ryan. He's like, okay. I look around, and I didn't realize this now because they've been there for almost a year at this point. It was 2007. This was the same office, or maybe we just moved, Mark. But
we just moved.
Okay, you did just move because there was still boxes everywhere and like tables set up and like cords ran across the floor. And anyway, that was my first experience of eSearch Vision. And the funny thing is that office and exactly how it looked with the boxes and the cords didn't change for about 3 years.
we actually used computer boxes to actually set up a meeting room, and we called that one the Dell meeting room, just so you know. And that's how bad it was. But again, like even though we were bootstrapped and very, very cheap, we grew to a point where the founders said, hey, how about we sell it? And because I was able to speak both French and English, so I knew the financials and I could partner with the French team, I had the opportunity to lead the roadshow. And got a few bids on the table that were very, very respectable, but the founders decided to essentially punt because they thought they could sell for more. Eventually they never sold. So after that episode, I left because I put my name on the hat to just like sell the business. So my reputation was, I had to just move on and do other things. And at that time, it was interesting because I did not. I mean, I think I did not realize how much like of a marketeer hat I was wearing. So when I tried to actually join like software houses, because I thought I was primarily doing tech, um, didn't have a strong response. So I had to I had to think about what type of company I would want to join in order to just like blend into the IT market in the US. And for me, the biggest parameter was well-funded company that was targeting growth at all costs. So a capital based like growth approach. Um, and that's how. And I know Ryan, you actually helped me get in touch with Jim Benton.
Yeah.
I joined ClearSlide.
Mhm.
ClearSlide was, probably could have been what Zoom is today. It was an interesting venture. It was a lot of great people that wanted to work super hard. And so I stayed there for 2 years. It was intense outbound growth mode. And at ClearSlide, I had the opportunity of a lifetime to meet with John McMahon. Because in my second year at ClearSlide, Carlos De La Torre had joined as the head of enterprise and was leading SMB. And he brought McMahon as an advisor, and I met with John, and it's the most like radical thing that happened to me. When I left ClearSlide, John helped me get to Sumo Logic. Was my first like step into hardcore tech. Like Sumo is log management. I hate to say that, it's like kind of blue collar tech. It's like deep into technology and DevOps. And I built the inside / SMB motion for them. Worked great. And but at the end of the second year, I think what I had I became a little more pretentious, and I thought I wanted to just go and run sales effort myself. And then that's when I joined Mindtickle as their first head of sales. And it was a great adventure. And now we're getting to Snowflake. That's throughout trying to sell to Snowflake. When I was at Mindtickle, that's when Chris Degnan, called me and say, dude, I know you run sales right now, but here's my problem. I don't know how to run inside. I don't have an effing clue how to do that. Are you interested? And I had Snowflake on my radar for a while. Obviously, never would have known that it would be that phenomenal success, but like it felt hot and it felt different, especially throughout the interview process. And that's when I joined. I mean, Degnan told me there was an inside sales team. He lied. There was like 10 baby SDRs and 3 guys that, when I first asked them about their forecast, didn't looked at me like I was crazy. And here we go. Like, 5 years later, this is a 200 people organization that drives a significant portion of Snowflake's revenue. And a lot of people that have graduated up in the enterprise or even in the verticals that the organization that covers the largest account, and or in leadership at Snowflake. So I could not be more proud of what has been done in the last 5 years. Plus the SDR function that got split and moved to marketing with Lars Nielsen's leadership now. That transition happened 2 years ago. Add 2 extra 100 people running like sales campaigns here. So it's started with 13 reps, and now combined organizations, one of them run by Lars. It's probably 400 kids that are learning how to sell, which is absolutely fantastic and super gratifying for me.
So the journey was like every step along the way from you thought you were going to be a musician,
Yeah.
pianist. By the way, Mark's pretty good at
Thank you.
playing the piano. You learned to start selling pianos. You moved into channel, kind of
Yeah.
like, hey, how do I get involved in tech? It's not quite tech yet. Then recruiting, which I think is
Yeah.
going to be fundamental to some of the things you have here, really
All
learning
right.
how to find great talent.
Yeah.
Uh, Stumbled into bootstrapped, which a lot of us end up doing to try to get going.
I mean,
Uh,
this is Bootstrap is MBA. It's an amazing thing. It's like when you work for a Bootstrap company, it's when you don't know whose job it is, it's yours. Look, if you remember, I was the IT admin for, I mean, I was I know how to run like an NT4 network with multiple locations and manage domain and all that stuff, which was not necessarily something I knew before I joined. So,
yeah, you have to wear, well, you wear lots of hats within
uh,
ESV.
uh,
But the bootstrap experience, then to like true hyper growth, pretty
yeah,
well funded, growth at out cost, what you're looking
yeah,
for.
yeah,
Then finally into some hardcore tech, which really gave you the advantage of where you're at now. And then a little
mm,
bit of a stint of another funded company. The interesting thing about this, though, Mark, is like every step along the way, it's not just about experience, but it was like priming you for where you needed to be.
mm,
And you can't just step into that role of Snowflake without that adventure. And there's not that many people who have that unique lens. And so now I wanted to talk about now where we're at is stages of growth, right? So
yeah,
you're into Snowflake now.
yeah,
You come in at Series C. There's 13 reps. You grew it all the way to it's over 400 now, right? But there's a path along the way,
yeah,
and you already experienced some of the earlier stage paths all the way
mhm,
up until that point. Like you
mm,
just keep going through those gates. And thank you for sharing those backgrounds. But again, if you're a leader, you're going to want to start to sharpen your pen a little bit, or a rep, start to hone in here because I'm going to start diving into how Mark was able to take Snowflake from 13 reps to 200, and
I mean,
thinking
that's
through.
only the SMB side, right? I mean, if you think
No,
about Snowflake as a team, we probably well over 1,000 people in the sales org today.
absolutely. And so, I mean, this is prime time, and what we're talking about here too is again, how do you get into the minds of somebody who's gone through the earlier journeys? He thinks about these stages in a really interesting way, and now he's in here. He's in the seat, and I'm going to ask some questions around what this looks like, and we're going to look at each of these stages. And Mark, I asked him, "Hey, what is it ahead of time from C to IPO? What are the gates?" Right? We talked about a few of these along the way, but what are the gates that we're looking at? And he defined these as the first one is vision. So these are stage definitions, exit criteria. So in order for us to get from stage one to the next stage, we got to get to the next one. So vision, and then growth at all cost, and then yield, then eventually to IPO. And so we're going to dive into each one of these. And again, I got to get these slides working on my side. So we're going to start with vision. And Mark, when it comes to vision, first, can you define that a little bit? And then what we want to dig into here is the questions I'm going to ask about is people, process, technology. So what is it? And then when we think about people, process, and technology, this is that formula we tend to think about for success, right? In what order? And then how does all that work? That's we're going to dive into it. And then the last thing we'll cover in each of these stages is our biggest learning. Like, what did you take away here as we progress? So first of all, could you define vision? What does that mean as a stage in this growth
That means
journey?
that, it's if you like translate that into the crossing the chasm, it's like when you go and you still sell to early adopters or even innovators to a certain stage, right? But here's what's going on there. Like you at Snowflake specifically, we started like pushing a data warehouse and trying to displace other data warehousing players. But if you think about the vision of the company itself was to solve companies' problems related to data. It's much, much bigger. And somewhat when you are in vision stage, you are pushing a product that may not necessarily fulfill that vision 100% yet. So what you are pushing is something that is, you selling the future. And it's hard because you need to be like a big believer of that. And as a sales individual, you need people that are embracing what the company is here to solve. It's not just about people looking to get like to accelerators in their comp plan. It's really much more than that. And you're going to knock on a ton of doors with people looking at you. It's like, I don't care. I don't need that. I have what I need. And so it's a at that time we were led by Bob Muglia, who's an absolutely amazing visionary with regards to like product and putting things together. So he pushed us and he rallied us behind what Snowflake would become eventually. And you have to drink a lot of Kool-Aid to actually go in, because you have a ton of people that are saying no. So it's the no's are like pretty brutal.
So just to double click into this a little bit, I know
Yeah.
we love that term from our old demo days, right? That and slice and dice our data. So you're at Series C and you're still talking about vision. At this time,
Yeah.
there's 13 reps. How much cash was raised at this time?
I think it's hundreds, right? 150 million, something like this.
Okay,
It was that money. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of traction
Mm.
to get there. The vision had to be huge, right?
Mm.
But still at this stage, and this is really important for some of the reps who might be interested in, hey, what kind of company do I get into at the right stage? And what kind of person am I? So lots of money in the bank, but still as a salesperson, you're still out there not necessarily getting easy wins, right? It's
No.
still a lot
No.
of no's. And then ultimately the product maybe isn't even there yet, right? You're saying vision. So when you
Yeah.
say we're selling on what it would be, not what it is. And so
Yeah.
even if we can get a conversation started, well, what we say and what we might be able to deliver, there's some gray area. And this is always kind of a contingent thing. And so when we think about the leadership side of this right now, Mark, that again, people, process, technologies,
Mm.
what are some of the things outside of just understanding that you have to have a little bit of thick skin, you got to be more of a hustler, but what are some of the things you're thinking about in the types of people and maybe some of the top challenges that you're facing there to really make sure that that's happening, right? Because you still have a revenue target, lots of money in the bank.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Growth, not at all costs, but vision still means growth, right?
Yeah. I'll start with the thing that is consistent across the board, no matter what stage. Especially in a team like mine where I hired primarily like early stage professionals. I'm not hiring experience. I honestly could not care less about experience. What I'm trying to find is the characteristics from a personality and drive perspective that are going to be key in order for that person to push. So the first thing, honestly, is how much grit, how much drive do they have? And it's even more important early stage in a business like this because of the pretty frequent no's that you're going to have. But the second, I think the biggest characteristic for sales, if you want to get big and good at sales, one of the things you have to work on is your memory. Because what we do in sales, we are processing information all day long. And the bad sales reps talk for hours. The good sales reps talk to guide a conversation, but they pay more attention to what they receive versus what they send. And what you receive, you have to process in the information, understand it. You have to potentially just like have a response like it's pretty immediate. But even if it's not an immediate response, you're gonna have to put that in a hot storage memory. So at some point throughout the sales process with that specific customer, you may pull an information you heard 3 weeks ago, put that in front, and that could be a differentiator for the deal. So how you process the information, how you memorize it, and how you make it usable long term, this is absolutely critical. And it's even more important early stage because you are looking for a unicorn that can do everything, not care much about how hard it is, but still be able to, again, like push the boundaries of what the company is able to go and where we are able to sell. Because you're also going to have to get people to understand, how to define your ideal customer profile. Because at that stage, you're still trying to be opportunistic. Truth is, if you want to make your business repeatable, you need to know your ICP, and you should not take, people that want to come to you. So inbounds is super important, especially for the larger companies. But for the smaller ones, you can't rely on inbound. You have to go out. You have to choose your customers because that's what's going to drive faster revenue growth.
So we talk about the people here. You brought up something that a lot of people talk about grit. We want someone who's strong, but you said something that's very unique, just memory, right? Being the cognitive ability, right? And somebody who can not just take words that are coming at them, but really understand what's happening. You got two of these and one of these. That was really interesting. And then you transition a little bit into process here too, which is like, hey, we got to start to think about our process. Some of the things that we talk about here at Cognizant right now is the future of SDRs, which the future of outbound in general,
Yeah.
is aligned with what you're talking about way back, but this was 5 years ago, right? So you got to understand your targeting. You're talking about the need for outbound, but inbound and outbound. But early on, outbound is probably more important at this stage, right? So
Yep.
process, but being super targeted on these are probably our best customers. Anything else is kind of a distraction right now,
That's right. Yeah.
and that's huge because a lot of folks don't feel that way. They kind of want to take the leads early on, um, and uh, that could be the death. And so, how does that transition into the maybe tool set, right?
Yep.
This is 5 years ago, so
Mm.
we've advanced a bit, but by then there was a lot of really good technology in the
Yeah.
market. How
Yeah.
did you think about evaluating tech at this stage, right? Knowing what you need to do, right? You're trying to
Yeah.
find great people, you're trying to find unicorns. That's actually a problem. Hey, again,
Yeah.
SDRs, write this down, right? He's a sales leader. He's trying to find really good people that don't necessarily have the experience. So if you want to go to someone like Mark at this stage, you just got some good nuggets here. Second piece is process oriented. How do I actually have a defined process and outbound
Mm.
oriented? Hey, they're not looking for someone who's here to take orders. They want someone who's going to go knock down doors and have something between their ears. Okay. But now what about the technology? So I want to try to get in front of you at this stage. I'm thinking about these things. These are the problems I have. What kind of tools are you thinking about? How does somebody engage you? What was the evaluation process like at this stage?
Yeah. Well, I think, at a company like that, a company that stage, very often the systems you find are the ones that the reps procured or use themselves. So most of them solve an issue that is almost like an individual problem. So we had a couple of solutions back then that were okay to actually track activity. So you could see when emails were open and things like this. But here's what I needed back then. I needed something that would be a lot more controllable at my level to understand what went out, the frequency of it, making sure that we would control, every single soft metric in terms of conversion. And there's something that I care deeply about is how you go outbound. And I mean, all the hundreds of people that have been through that, they know I have very specific expectations on how to do it. And I cannot tolerate the team to actually go out. And it's not just because I know it works, it's also a branding effort. What you don't realize is how you come across as an organization when your prospecting engine or your follow-up engine for inbound, by the way, it's true for both. When your engine is super professional, when your engine is somewhat rigid to a point that people eventually they know that if they are touched by one of your team members, they are they are completely, like, they know exactly how things are going to go. The beauty of it is you create a brand, and that brand specifically is going to be hyper positive for your business. I think, Ryan, you back? There we go.
I am back. Yeah, sorry, internet went down a little bit. Hopefully, you were still going. Yeah.
Yep. So again, like, the idea is you build a brand for your product and you participate to how professional your company is perceived. And I guarantee out there's I know it may sound fun, but stop sending pictures of cats when you don't have attention of the person that is you're sending an email to. It's not going to work. You can be hyper professional, and if you think about not talking about the actual content, but the mindset that you need to have when you go outbound like that. The first one, very, very important one, you need to know why the company is going to be interested. You need to know. You're not here to have a company figure out why they should be interested in your thing. So the mindset you need to have when you go outbound like that is, I know we should talk. And
So
if you start there, it's going to make a massive difference to your day to day.
it's I always try to tell people how blessed I was, and still continue to be, having learned how to do all this before all this technology, before all
Yeah,
this like
you,
database
you did
stuff.
you did it manually, which is insane, but yeah, that's true.
We had to research a website, make sure that website actually not only spent, but spent enough money, $50,000 a month in the middle of the recession. And once I had the actual website, we'd have to go find a phone number, call, and ask who's in charge of something most people didn't even understand. Finally, get a name. This whole process, and Mark was so his visibility and control pieces. Mark is so particular
A
about this
control
stuff,
freak.
and I wouldn't say it's not such a control freak, but I'm so blessed because everything that you taught me back then has developed everything I do now, right? It's my whole, and you just hit something that it just reminded me. Like I try to tell people about this all the time. Outbound creates inbound, and especially early on, and
Yes.
it's a branding effort. At eSearch Vision, again, bootstrapped. We lived in we basically had a Roach Motel office in the middle of San Francisco, and we're competing against some of the most funded companies that were getting acquired by Googles and Adobes of the world. We're competing in the final rounds with almost all of those
And
organizations.
we kicked ass. I mean, we did win so
Yep.
many times against them, and they were afraid of us. You know,
And it was
it was
it's
amazing.
because of this
Yeah.
visibility control, even back then without a lot of the technology, visibility control. And again, you guys got to write this stuff down. This is what he cares about at this stage. If he is a sales leader, what does he care about? He needs to see what's happening. He wants to have some control over that environment. Uh, and then outbound is so important to him right now. Again, write this down. Uh, but the principles here about if you're a leader and you're allowing your current team right now, one, not to do outbound and not focusing on outbound, well, you're going to be in trouble. And then two, the branding exercise here, the stuff that goes on with sequences and not picking up the phone and not doing the things you have to do that are hard, that are going to get the no's. You're really doing yourself a disservice. So, in interest of time, Mark, because we have a couple more stages, I want to continue
Yeah.
because we'll come back to these principles.
Yeah. Of course.
But just huge. And so what was the biggest learning at this stage? You're evaluating some of these tools. You got the process. But if you look back at this particular stage, was there anything you learned now being a part of this new series C
Yeah.
that was different from your initial journey?
I think. I mean, I was. We are still blessed by the best marketing team on earth at Snowflake. And when I started, it was very much like, hey, we're gonna give you the business that you want to go after. And as I'm a little stubborn, and I said, I'm gonna go and do things my way a little bit.
Yep.
But I think what I learned is like we built a phenomenal partnership together. Because yes, of course, like the leads came in, and it was very important specifically for the SDR organization because the SDR, the marketing team was able to warm up large logos and let us know, because it was the very, very premise of ABM, let us know when we should attack and when there was some traction. It was great. But then on my other side of this planet, the revenue generation side of my group, you know, what I was able to convince the business to do is like, don't rely on people that want to work with you. Go and find the best. And because we did that, what was the difference is like we were still a high volume game, but the companies we picked generated 90% of our revenue. So our revenue stream, because at first, like nobody believed in the model. We thought we would be a town on the map, and now we probably more than a state. Which is pretty big if you think about it. And all of that was very much about finding the ICP profile, which I think at that stage it's absolutely critical. Once you own your ICP, then mostly good things can happen.
That's the concept of market dominance. You make a list, you call the list, you follow up.
Right.
So, and we'll keep going here because I'm just fired up. So next stage, Mark, growth at all costs. So what changes? We had the baseline. What any changes? People, process, technology. Anything become more important? Is there any changes in the profile? Is there more built up here?
No
Dive in
dramatic
here.
changes. I think for me that stage was higher, and even more than today. Like
Does
it's
that
just like,
impact? I know you're a recruiting expert, but does this start to impact like? Do you bring in? So this is a cultural thing too. Do you slow down hiring if you can't find the right people, or when you say at all costs, are you maybe doing a little bit more churn and burn? How do you
no.
think about this as a leader?
I always push my leadership team, like, understaffed, over deliver. I know it may sound a little harsh, but if you have people that are not going to make it, you're wasting your time. Because on top of that, when you go through a high growth phase like that, one thing is a lot of your managers will be first time leaders that you promoted from within.
Yep.
And the big mistake for managers, because now you are creating a team where you have like management layers. The most managers spend the majority of their time with their bench. People that are struggling or that take time. And guess what? If you think about Steve Kerr at the Warriors, he's not spending the majority of his time with the Santa Cruz Warriors. He spends time with the Warriors, the Golden State Warriors, and he develops like everything about his top players. And his top players, by the way, if you think about when Kevin Durant joined the Warriors, even top players have to adapt. Teams adapt, top players adapt, and you have to manage your top performers, stay very close to them, spend the majority of your time with them, and have all their talent and foundings cascade down. So as you do that, you can't settle, because if you I think it's important also to fail fast. Unfortunately, when you realize that a candidate joining your company is not going to make it, you have to treat them outrageously respectfully and potentially help them find a better spot in a different business. But own and be accountable to the fact that if it didn't work out the right way, it may be because you made a mistake. And it's also part, again, getting back to the brand part, it's very important that you treat top and low performers very professionally. And when you exit someone, because sometimes you have to, especially at that stage, you're building your company reputation based on how you exit people. And it's very important. And that if you exit poorly, people will start knowing that, and you will not be able to hire anymore.
It's huge. It's a sensitivity thing here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you say growth at all costs, it's there's a little bit of well, if we got the right people in the first place, we can rely on those folks that are going to be driven and get it done, even if we're understaffed, over delivered. But man, you can see that becomes such a challenge. You see the glass doors of some companies that were on fire, and then this stage comes, and some of that cultural, so they call it culture, right? It gets a little bit burned up,
and it's
sensitivity.
Sad. It's sad because on top of that, you have people that could potentially make it that like throw the towel because they're not treated the right way. That's not good. I think Ryan is. Yeah.
And when it comes,
you back
my round.
Okay,
Stuff. You were already getting honed in on.
Connection is pretty bad. I guess I can as Ryan gets connected back, I can follow up a little bit. The following stage for us past growth at all cost was at a time when so we changed CEOs. Frank Slootman joined, and for those of you who haven't done it, I would highly encourage you to go and buy his book, Amp It Up, because he explains a lot of what I'm going through right now for Snowflake. And when we go to yield, it added the concept of unit economics. It added concepts of efficiency. It was no longer hire at all costs for us. It was organized for $1 billion revenue. That's that. And we obviously announced our earnings yesterday. That's something that we beat last year. So it was, again, hire. Yes, sure, you can continue hiring, but then how are you driving efficiency? And as a sales leader, one of the metric that I started looking at eventually was productivity.
So I don't know if I'm back here, Marc.
You are. Yeah.
Okay. I think dropping the screen share might help with the bandwidth issue. So we'll drop the slides. We don't really need them. If this is okay, we'll see if this helps. Before we move into yield, because you're getting to productivity and yield, again, I really want to help people understand the mindset of you right now. Problems, growth at a cost. So again, people still a big problem. The right people are huge.
But I would call them an opportunity more than a problem, but yeah.
Well, an opportunity, yes, absolutely. And when we think about process, we're trying to hone that in, get really tight. Let's get back into technology, right? So a lot of people at this stage are going to come to you and promise, hey, hire less people, get more productivity, growth at cost, and walk me through where your mindset was at this, especially at this stage, because you're really at the heart of the explosion of a sales tech, ecosystem. Coming from the marketing background, now you're in the sales tech background, which you were selling in that. I just imagine, the who's who's. What did that look like? How did you filter through the noise? What was that process like? What did you find was most important? And then we'll move into some of the yield stuff.
I mean, I think from a product standpoint, and the tool set was, hey, it at that time I needed something almost tailored. So I needed, I needed an ESV or research vision to sell to us. Someone who would make an effort and use Snowflake candidly as a market reference point. That's what I push for. I know it's a little bit of a, you can range a little bit, but here's the deal. Like when you sell to a vendors, like you are going to sell to Snowflake. We are growing so fast. I need this from you. And what we are going to do together is I'm going to put your brand on the map. And it's a win-win deal. And, and we did that with Apollo. We had, a few things here and there that, in the yield phase we had to change, but in that first growth at all cost, Apollo was the perfect player for us because they listened to us, they were engaged, and they built a pretty remarkable product dedicated to outbound, which was pretty remarkable.
Just out of curiosity, who was the person that started that conversation?
So it's a weird dude that comes from math background called Ryan Reisert. Yeah.
Oh, someone who came in and yeah. So someone who came in and listened to you with 2 years. Yeah. But what? Yeah. So you got the outbound tool set, and the thing that Apollo brought to the table was more of like an all-in-one, right? Yeah. It had the data, it had the sequencer, it had the workflow, it gave you the visibility and the control you're looking for. It was vital for you. It just happened to do that, and then there was the flexibility within the leadership team, which was huge because they formed a. I'm sure it evolved once I moved on, but we formed a very creative deal with you. We got creative, we sharpened the pencil, and we solved a lot of problems that you were looking for. So again, if you're a sales rep trying to break into a company at that stage, the things you're looking for, you got to have the 2 years and one mouth. You also have to have an organization that understands that when you're going after a company like this, you can't be so structured. You can't be, no, this is our thing. If leadership's not willing to be a little bit creative, you're going to have a hard time winning those deals.
Not too much, so you don't disengage from your core focus, but yes,
sure,
you have to be focused. Yeah.
No, I mean, you can't just do that for everybody, but the right types of opportunities, and then getting into the next phase now of tool sets. I guess there's like lots of things you're looking for, someone to tailor you in there. What's that transition into yield now? So we got growth at all cost. You got the people that are pretty good. You got that nailed now. You got your process really good. Obviously, you got most of the technology in place. That is shifting now from growth at all costs, though, into yield. Yeah. Yield being productivity, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. But productivity and cost control, right? It's controlling costs in my group is
where are we at this stage in terms of headcount and revenue? And was there more? I know we didn't talk about like the funding rounds because we were at C, and then growth at all costs was maybe
D,
and then
DE,
and yield is coming in
like DE,
right towards the end of that. Okay, so just again going back, making sure people are kind of seeing the triggers here. Now D&E, yield, lots of all the other stuff's in place now, but what's important to you? What's the problems? What are you thinking about? How does yield start to formulate? The unique vision I hear from you is that you're really already controlling this a little bit early on. Not when you say growth at all costs, you're not just like throwing bodies at the problem, which is probably helpful. Especially for the reputation thing as well. But what are the things you start to think about at this stage? What shifts away from some of the other fundamentals that we talked about?
Yeah, it's so if you think about as a sales leader, the very, very basic stuff you can influence is this: the deal size, deal velocity, and ramp. Deal size, deal velocity for my group was, we had a good grip on how to do things right because of our identified ICP. But I think the very large driver for me to actually influence to yield was ramp. We had a great, probably something that a lot of field sales team would like in terms of ramped productivity, but I had to just like double down on ramping productivity because the blend itself is what determines the efficiency of the organization. So it was very much about like, let's put things together so the team can be ramped consistently with higher results. So, it's like turning on your engine, warm it up, and make sure that you test how your engine can get close to overheat, but not quite there. So it's pushing people, it's pushing how much they can do, not getting crazy in terms of number of hours. You don't want people to lose their mind. Again, I want people to be happy in their job, otherwise it's useless. They're not going to stay. But so it was that, and I think it was also. I mean, my organization is very lean and has always been. That's a part of my own approach. So at least from a cost perspective, we didn't have necessarily much to save, right? It's always been, as you know, Ryan, it's all about efficiency. But so for us, the biggest thing was ramping productivity. And as we did that, we influenced the results for Snowflake in an absolutely unbelievable manner.
What were some of the things that what were some of the things that worked there? Again, let's get into it. Is it focusing more on people development, more training,
Yes.
more coaching? Is it better process updates, or were there any types of technologies that you might have found that helped with that
Sorry, I need to
that
find a plug
phase?
somewhere. Don't have a plug.
Do you still have this problem? By the way, this is Mark. Flashbacks 2008. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. Power's dead.
Yes, I know. Let me just this is a
He's
bootstrap
down.
webinar, people.
He's down to 1%.
It's gonna be fine. Give me just
I don't have internet connection. Mark needs his power on.
Hey,
Bear with us.
that's how you build unicorns.
We're bootstrapping here.
There we go. Done.
He's in.
Oops, this is not connected. That's bad. There's no power on this one. So I'll be back in 1 sec.
That's all right. So as we get Mark's power,
there we go. Done.
All right, perfect. So again, people, process, tech. I'm always just really curious, where are you finding the most yield? Like, is it doubling down on training and development? Is there any type of process updates that are dramatic at this stage, or do you have any, magic technology that came in and just created productivity promises that we all see from marketing?
Not technology. It was and not necessarily refining the process. It was documenting things better. So it would essentially lead to reps not improvising at all. I'll give you a specific example. I have a very talented rep who's now in the field. So she joined around that, between the hardcore growth and yield phase. She then just she was then promoted to a first line leadership level in my group, and then she's now in the field. And she was putting every single piece of energy in her job, trying to be successful. But it was pretty obvious that the type of customers that she was developing relationships with were not necessarily the ones that would explode. So that's when I put together things as simple as what we call the 4C process for pipeline generation, or PG. And it was just like, you're going to follow everything as
hold on,
sequence.
we need to hear what the 4Cs
are. 4Cs are. Hey, all right, hello. So it just my brain functions like a motorcycle gearbox, so sequential. You can't go from 2 to 6. It's like 1 and then neutral, 2, 4, 5, 6. And that's how my brain functions. I need to go one step at a time, one step forward. And so I told the teams, all right, that if you want to be successful, you need to identify a company that has high propensity to buy Snowflake in a certain fashion. So the first C is the company. Yep. The second C is the contact, because as you have your clear idea of how Snowflake is going to make a difference and why we should go after that business. You need to understand who you need to talk to. And in this case, it's part of the social media research, part of LinkedIn research. Make sure that you try to understand what people care about. And as you are going to get in front of them, what you're going to do is project another customer success story from Snowflake. You're not going to tell, hey, we know that people like you struggle. No, people don't want that. We're going to tell them, hey, this company that I know did that with Snowflake. This is what they achieved. I would like to spend some time trying to verify if we can replicate that success with you. And when you are, again, it's a very simple trick, but in this case, people have already projected into a better tomorrow because they understand there's a positive business outcome that's achievable. And now they are potentially prepared to share with you what's not necessarily working well. So you are engaging in a conversation. So as you are doing that, so it's contact. And now the third C is communication, because you need to understand what's going to trigger the interest of that contact. And the fourth is control. And control starts when you are doing outbound or even like inbound control. Like it's having all the sequences that are set and followed to make sure that contact is maintained and the door is open. And by the way, that control is also very critical because as you are now entering into the phase that is running the sales cycle itself, when it's in tech, you're probably doing a POV or a POC, depending on how you call that. This is when you need to control it. As a rep, you are the CEO of your own deal. And this is very important that you start that control in your head as early as in the PG process. So these 4 Cs, that's the good part is, as it's overly simple and sequential, when you spend time on an account with a rep, you will also have an easier way to identify where the flaw is if for any reason their results is not good. So you have to simplify, and that's when I sliced and diced, but I simplified everything. I went to something that was super easy to follow in order for first line leaders that, again, were for the most of them first line leaders, first time leaders, so first line and first time leaders. These things were so simple that it was easier to put the finger on what was broken. And as you do that, you improve everything pretty dramatically. And that's when our ramping productivity became, honestly, like pretty incredible.
I love this.
It was a simplification.
I love these 4 Cs. And clearly, like, so influenced by you, and you developed this. It sounds like later on in Sprinkler to really, or Snowflake. I was my old Sprinkler days, Snowflake. But it's always been that way. Target companies sell to people. We talk about that, right? Target companies sell to people, and it's the people. Not don't waste time with the other wrong people. And then communication all starts with the conversation, right? And more conversations means better outcomes. This is right back to our pillars that we're focused on here at Cognizant now. And then this idea of control, which a lot of people really shun away from, but that's about enablement and understanding that if we have consistency in our process, nothing slips through the cracks, but we also have consistent messaging, consistent cadence, and now all of a sudden the unit economics, the math, right, of what's happening, the productivity is important. So you define that along the way, and that's the yield comes. So we're running a little bit tight here. Marc, I want to get into IPO now, right? So we are now at IPO. What's that like? What is it like? What is it like to hit the ring the bell? You did it, and I know you've been after this for so long. You worked
my 7th attempt. Yeah, the 7th startup.
You worked your tail off. You worked your tail off. And you made it.
Well, I didn't. I mean, there's always a way to actually do more, and I can't stop. I think the biggest change is this. Like, now you can't fail. You absolutely can't fail. Like, even as a private company, the story of Snowflake was that you can't fail, but now you're like, the street is watching you. So you have to essentially become a mailman and deliver every day. Rain or shine or snow, like it's
I love that.
So
it's not easier. There's even more pressure now.
There's more pressure.
Well, I mean, you have earnings reports, right? If you miss, you're probably axed.
That's right.
At this stage.
And then, for sure. I mean, it's being in a sales leadership position is you're the first one to go if things are hard. But it may not be the right thing to do for the company, but it's obvious that you are an easy target.
There's not that many. I was trying to look at this. There's not that many people who have led the corporate sales, inside sales from all of these stages through IPO have lasted this long. The average tenure for a VP of sales in most companies like 18 months. Marc's been here for 5 years. So at this stage now, and I know we only have a few minutes, and I wanted to open up for, I don't know if you're able to go a little bit longer for open
Yeah,
Q&A,
yeah,
Mark. If not, but just the last stage here, because it's current state, and maybe someone want to get in front of you. What is top of mind outside of deliverable? Obviously, you have to deliver, but what are the things that are most important to you these days?
mm,
It's IPO, of course, it's earnings, but what are the things that might keep you up at night, or those drivers? Because there's not really, I guess, a next level outside of just go and dominate the market. But
yeah.
for you, what am I thinking about if I'm a rep or if I'm a leader trying to think about this stuff? How do I get here?
Well, I'll start with my own personal mindset. Snowflake is probably the fastest growing publicly traded company in America today, and I want my team to grow faster than Snowflake every day. That's something, and God knows I push my team hard. With that mindset in mind, like, let's go. We're gonna grow faster than Snowflake, no matter what. And that means we are going to do things better every day. We're going to improve our processes and refine it better every day. We're going to just like push the boundaries of professionalism, every day. That's the, just, and always with never forgetting about the fundamentals, right? Everything I described, the 4 C's, our processes, the outbound, and the brand awareness that is driven out of like an outbound PG process, and how you position, how you talk to customers. You can't get derailed from that. I think what keeps me up at night is I want to always be able to go and look at, because a lot of the success I have, I owe it to also to Chris Degnan, my boss, that he's given me an incredible amount of freedom to run things the way I believed was the right one, the right way. So I owe him a ton. But like, guess what? I want to be able to look at him in the eyes every day. Like, you know what? We are dominating our market. We winning. And this is why. But you know what? We need to continue doing more, and this is how we're going to do it. I guess it's a permanent, like, machine. And also for me, I get probably most of what I feel is gratifying by seeing careers grow. I have so many of and it's funny that even like recently, one of my an SDR I hired years ago, called me on Sunday afternoon. I have an offer. Sorry, I should have reached out to you before. I'd like to get your feedback on, is it good or not? Like, I called him back and we talked, and I think he's expecting his contract tomorrow. That's what makes me like feel happy. It's I want the team. If you are in my team for a second, once in my team, forever in my team.
That's very true. Uh, Even if you butt heads,
If you
Mark and
buy
I
it.
were not always so cordial with one another, and we spent
Yeah,
a long time together, growing a pretty fast growth bootstrap company together. Mark, there's some questions flowing in here. I did a terrible job of managing calendars, but your story is so powerful, and there's just so much to try to get in here. Thank you so much for.
of course.
I don't know. This was awesome, at least for me, and I'm hoping people got what I was hoping to get out of this from this. There's some questions coming in here. Do you mind answering a couple right now? I know we only have a
No,
few
no,
minutes
please.
left.
That's fine. Let's go. Let's go for it.
So the first one, which I think is pretty key here, is how did you get manager level buy-in when it comes to implementing the variables that are required to structure prospecting? So this control variable here, right? I mean, you're the leader, but you obviously have layers at this stage. I guess the question.
Well, I'm a stubborn leader, so I get things done a certain way. But I think I think the most part is this, like, getting manager buy-in is showing it works. And I think I've always led by example, showing that I'm able to do stuff. And I also involve people. When we build these, I involve the leadership team in how we're going to do it. And the how we're going to do it is not necessarily something that you build in your own silo. It's something that you talk to prospects and customers with. And I know it may sound surprising, but as people were onboarded early on at Snowflake for my group, I would stay in touch with these customers, making sure that we would, essentially deliver what we sold. And eventually I would always stay in touch with them to think, hey, in terms of messaging, I want to hear things from you. So I'm not selling my own jargon. I say things that matter to you. And I would involve the managers for that. And when they hear that from customers, because I don't want them to hear that from me, when they heard that from customers and prospects or people that said no at first, I would reach out and say, I'm not going to try to push, but I want to understand why our message did not resonate. Tell
Mhm.
me. Because again, like there's nothing worse than a communication that's built, looking at yourself, right? You can't be self-centered, and you can't focus on your own jargon. If because otherwise, if you focus on your own jargon, you're going to be put in a box, and people will perceive you in a way that may not necessarily be true to your offering.
I hope leaders are listening to that one right there. Obviously, there was a question that's designed for that. Leadership to, management to the front lines. It gets so lost, especially when you talk about control. And this is the debate about scripts not working and sequences without control, and SDRs don't have their availability to, write their own copy and things like that. There's a debate out there, but the reality is the reason why that doesn't work for a lot of organizations is because that feedback loop isn't there. You don't have someone coming down and saying, "Hey, what's happening?" And it's not my opinion as the leader. It's not Mark's
Yeah.
opinion. It's the customer's perspective here. All the way back to the way that Mark looks at this from a brand perspective.
Mm.
And that feedback is so valuable along the way. It's incredible, right? When you start to speak your customer's language, well,
Mm.
now you're having real conversation.
Mm.
That's huge.
Right.
Another one is, and maybe we'll just do one more here, Mark, because we are tight on time. And if there's still come in, we can maybe do a follow on. Maybe
Sure.
get Mark to answer a couple on via like some video recordings at some point, but no promises there. Last one. I like this. From an enablement perspective, what did they do to support the sales organization to help drive your 4Cs? So sales enablement is another one of those hot topics, right? It's a new
Mm.
thing. Um, Sometimes you're a big proponent of building relationships here, but how do they support your enablement with the 4Cs here?
Well, I think it's important for a sales leader to just tell enablement what they need, and what they need, not necessarily on the how it's going to be provided and delivered. It's what they need in terms of execution. Because I think very often the mistake with enablement is that the end destination isn't set. So the enablement is around like things that are in theory helpful, but at the end of the day, like when you have spoken to customers, when you have a strong point of view on how to do things, then you need to just like reverse back to, okay, let's actually understand all these steps, how they're going to be done. And then you need to partner with enablement, because these are the pros of delivering the message. And these are the pros of evaluating whether that message went through. But I think for me, it's important that I am in control of my sales process, but I use enablement to make sure that people understand how to do it, and they get to that stage as fast as possible using, the Minticles of the world and other stuff. But what I own is very much like how it's going to be done. If I don't have a point of view there, I don't know what I do in sales leadership. It's very, very important. So how we did it, like we again reversed engineer. Okay, how do enablement? You are the learning, the L&D pro. How do you think people will learn that as fast as possible? So I empowered them to build how things would be learned and taught. But I think it was very important to me to own the end result, because at the end of the day, it's my number.
So one thing that I think we missed a little bit on that just touches on this, and it's why you care so much about people, and why you say it's control, but it is more about enablement. But we share something in common a little bit. Like your parents are teachers, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, your parents are teachers. I was supposed to be a teacher, and you can tell Mark is a consummate teacher. He's just a incredible, not just leader but teacher. And that's the part here, because it's not about um, you establish these boundaries, and yet you're enabling this vision that you have, but you allow
Yeah,
people to play in those rules. And it's really hard, I think, for people to get until they have the experience. If anyone ever does have a chance to work for Mark,
yeah.
I highly encourage it. So if he's
I
still
I
growing his team,
I would want
got
to
it.
wrap up with something like,
Yeah.
because it's so the I'm a big rugby fan, and
Hmm.
even though I'm a proud U.S. citizen today, I was born and raised in France, and I still support the French team. And as of these current weeks, the Six Nation is going on. This is the biggest tournament, the rugby tournament in the world. And so, if you think about the French coach, the French coach that took over the team 2 years ago, France was not doing well at that time, despite the fact that we have thousands of players. We officially did hide behind the fact that our talent pool was maybe not that good in that generation, which was not true. The coaching was the problem. And what Fabien Galtier actually has put together is this. He raised the intensity of practice. Because guess what? If during practice you are doing things that are much harder than in real life, when you hit that in real life, it's going to be easy. Simple thing. So he raised that intensity. So now the French players have, an amazing endurance, and they are able to, fight for the highest intensity game, with absolutely almost no interruption of like power. The second thing he did, he built a framework where there's roughly 35 to 40% of it that cannot be improvised. It's what he believes in. Like, you do that, and if you don't follow that playbook, you're out. You're not going to play next Saturday. But if you think about it, that's only 40%. 60% is about the creativity of the player, and you are then giving them the opportunity to be the genius and talented players they are. And now, hopefully, knock on wood, France will win the Six Nation this year, potentially with a Grand Slam. That would be phenomenal. But if you look at the almost the same players from 2 seasons ago to now, it made them think in a very rigid fashion for fundamentals, which is very important, but then enable them to become super creative and be so confident because the fundamentals are strong. It gives them confidence to do things creatively for what is very visible. And I get a lot of learnings from sports coach, for different sports. But I think that what I've witnessed there in the last 2 years made me think differently. Just increase intensity of practice, make sure that you give strong fundamentals, but not complete control, and then enable creativity of your team. And guaranteed, no matter what stage you are at, your team will hum by the time you implement that.
I love that. Having played rugby for a few years, it is truly the ultimate team sport. Some people like to say soccer is, but I mean, rugby even has more players on the pitch, and
everyone plays a role,
and everyone plays a role at all times. It's actually a pretty intense situation, and the fact that you can have the most talented team in the planet and still lose comes up in sport over and over and over again. But on the flip side, you might not have the most talented team in the world, but if you have the most talented coach, you see these miracles happen. And that's leadership 101. And again, having been a part of, I guess I was the very first
SDR,
very first
in the
SDR
US, yes.
ever in the US under Marc's leadership. Very, very honored to have been able to serve under you, and the impact you've had on my career is I just going through this today. It's like, holy crap! These are things that just are ingrained. That 40%, Marc, it's ingrained in my head, and it's all thanks to you. And again, I appreciate all your time today. Everyone who tuned in, thank you for joining us. There will be a recording, and if you all have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll see if I might be able to sneak some more time from Marc at some point in the future to get some of these these questions answered. But Marc, thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, it was great. Thank you very much for having me.